Okay, so now we're going to be talking about the chain rule. The chain rule is something you use to find the derivatives of composite functions. A composite function is any function where there's an overarching function with a smaller function inside of it, and it's shown as f of g of x. Examples of this would be y equals cos of 4x squared, where cos x is the overarching function, and then 4x squared is the smaller function, so g of x, and cos x is f of x. Another would be y equals e to the 7x cubed, where e to the x is just f of x, and then 7x cubed is g of x. And one more would be the square root of 3x minus 1, where the square root of x would be f of x, that's the overarching function, and 3x minus 1 would be g of x. So when you use this equation, you end up getting that the derivative of f of g of x is equal to f prime of g of x, which is really just the derivative of f of x, the overarching function, with g of x plugged in whenever you see x. And then you just multiply that all by g prime of x. Now, to make sense of this, we can look at some questions. The only restrictions for the chain rule is that both f of x and g of x need to be differentiable, because you have to find the derivative of them at some point. And just for simplicity, we say that f of x is the overarching function and g of x is the smaller function. So let's look at some examples. Let's start off with a really easy one, where your function is y equals sine of 2x. So first things first, always in the chain rule questions, you have to figure out which one is your f of x and which function is your g of x. In this situation, it's pretty easy to tell. You have your sine as the only thing there, really. It's the total function. So your f of x is going to be sine of x, and your g of x is the part inside of it, so it's going to be the 2x. And from there, we could figure out the derivatives of both of these, where the derivative of sine x is just cos x, and the derivative of 2x is just 2. So now that we know that, we can actually look at the equation and see what we can figure out. So the first thing you have to do to find the derivative is the derivative of f of g of x. So you take f prime of x and just plug in g of x whenever you have an x. So if f prime of x is cos x, you have to plug in g of x into where x is, so you get cos of 2x. So that's this first part, and then all you do is multiply that by g prime of x, which in this case is just 2. We've already figured out. So if you put those together, you end up getting that y prime is equal to 2 cos 2x. Now to do a slightly harder question, we can take the function of e to the 4x cubed. And again, first things first, we've got to figure out what is your f of x and what is your g of x. So here you can see that your f of x is just going to be e to the x, because that's the total function, and then your g of x is going to be this part inside of it, so it's going to be 4x cubed. If we want to find our derivatives now, we just take the derivative of e to the x is just e to the x again, and then the derivative of 4x cubed is just 12x squared using the power rule. So now that we do know that, we can go back to the equation. We can plug in f prime of g of x, which is just going to be f prime of x with g of x plugged in wherever you see x. So it's going to be e to the 4x cubed, because that's what g of x is. And you take all that and you multiply it by the derivative of g of x, which in this case is just 12x squared, using power rule again. So you end up getting this, which if you want to put it in front, you get y prime equals 12x squared times e to the 4x cubed. Now one more slightly harder example. We can take the function of y equals the square root of 3x squared minus 2x. Now again, it's pretty easy to tell what your f of x and what your g of x. Your f of x is going to be the square root of x, because that covers everything here. And then your g of x is going to be what's inside of that, so it's going to be 3x squared minus 2x. So if you have those two functions, we can find the derivatives of it. So the derivative of the square root of x is 1/2 x to the negative 1/2, because square root of x is really the same thing as x to the 1/2. And if you want to use power rule, you get this. And then for the function 3x squared minus 2x, the derivative of that is just 6x minus 2 using power rule. So we can go and look at the equation. So first we've got to figure out the f prime of g of x, which is f prime of x with g of x plugged in at x. So we have 1/2 of g of x, 3x squared minus 2x, all to the negative 1/2. And then we take that and multiply it by g prime of x here, which is just 6x minus 2. And in this case, you can actually simplify this together because what all of this right here is actually the same thing as 1 over 2 times the square root of 3x squared minus 2x, because negative 1/2 is the same thing as 1 over the square root of x. So if we do that, and then we multiply that by 6x minus 2, they end up going over top of each other. And then the 2's can cancel out, so you end up getting y prime is equal to 3x minus 1 all over the square root of 3x squared minus 2x.